What was that moment like coming off of, having this collection at Perry Ellis, being this young designer, and then taking this role on at this very, huge European house?
So Vuitton had become this huge luxury house, but it wasn't appealing to a young customer.
It wasn't cool.
It wasn't cool.
Yeah.
It had no cred. It had no clout. It had no nothing. What it had was this historic sort of monogram. So Mr. Arnault had this idea that he wanted someone to come in and shake it up.
Today on the show, on High Low with EmRata, we have Marc Jacobs. Why I'm so excited to have you on here is because you've been somebody who has had an incredible balance between artistry and business, which is extremely rare. And you've been able to stay culturally relevant through both of those channels, through incredible business and also through your creative process for decades, which is so impressive to me. We were just talking about your grunge-inspired collection for Perry Ellis in 1992, which kind of changed fashion completely, put you on the map, and also got you fired, which I think is a really interesting thing. And then you were at Louis Vuitton, obviously, as a creative director for 16 years.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Marc Jacobs, your own line, which you've done incredible collaborations through the years. You have continued to innovate and raise the bar. Your latest brand, Heaven, your 2023 spring collection, Heroes. I think that people overuse the word icon these days, but you are truly an icon. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Happy belated.
Very flattered.
Okay, well, it's all true. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
How does it feel?
It feels fine. I think, I think I've decided because I'm 60 that I should feel different or old or whatever. So I kind of made up my mind, and I think I've just done a number on myself, but I feel fine. I'm doing the same thing that I did last year or the year before that. I get up, I go to work. I mean, I probably use more hair dye than I ever have, and maybe a little bit more beard dye than I ever have. And I certainly could use a gym and a trainer, but other than that, I'm fine. I'm good. Still moving.
I mean, you definitely, it's not to say that 60 is old, but you do not look 60.
Well, I had a facelift last year too.
I want to talk to you about the
Go
facelift.
ahead. Let's talk
How
about
was it?
It was amazing. I mean, it wasn't like it was something I was dying to do. I think it was last year, or maybe it was the year before. It was 2 years ago now, I think. But Charlie, my husband, who certainly didn't need a facelift, had it in his mind that he wanted a facelift. So when I asked him what he wanted for his birthday, he said, I want a facelift. So I was like, okay, well, if you do it, I'll do it. So we thought we would get a couple's facelift.
Fun.
Some couples get massages together. We thought we'd get facelifts together. So we interviewed a couple of doctors, and then the one that we fell in love with was Dr. Giacono, who is amazing. And he's become a very good friend. And we thought could he do both of us on the same day? And it really would be. And he was like, yeah, if that's what floats your boat, I'll do it, And then it turned out I couldn't do it then.
Okay.
So I did it afterwards, shortly after Charlie did. And
the recovery is intense, no?
It wasn't, though. It was also so he's uptown. I stayed at his office one night with the nurses so they could observe everything. And then I moved into the Carlisle. I mean, we did such a number. We made it so cinematic and theatrical. I bought a cheap headscarf from Zittimer, and I tied it around my face and put big, dark Gucci glasses on. And
you were in character.
I just, it was all for Instagram. I just wanted to do, have these images for Instagram. So I went into the hotel. And then, of course, during the 4 days of my recovery, I, did selfies. And I did a selfie in the what is it called? That hyperbaric chamber, which was really great for recovery. I mean, it really accelerated recovery. But I had a nurse with me, and she monitored, my painkillers so that I wasn't naughty with my painkillers.
Right.
It was very, very well done. And also that I had proper attention, and then I could run over to his office and he could look at the healing. And all of it was really easy and good. And, I 4 days at the Carlisle watching movies.
I mean, it sounds fab.
It was fab.
Yeah.
And then I was really happy with the results. I was really glad I did it.
I feel like body modification is something you've always been interested in.
Anything modification.
Yeah.
I just think I don't know.
I remember when you guys had the Halloween costumes where you did the prosthetics and you were like female body. You were a female bodybuilder.
I was a female bodybuilder, and we were like kind of 1970s, 1980s. And we had these costumes made. I mean, they were all, they were foam costumes that we had done by this incredible costume shop in New York who's done costumes for me before. And, I just love like role play, character acting, and like creating a character and getting very into it. We called ourselves Larry and Stacy.
I remember.
And I had these fingernails, and I like my hand movements were very much who Stacy would be. And like even the Ziploc bag that I had with my makeup so that it didn't go directly in the like I got so into the part, You
became Stacy.
I was Stacy for the night, yeah.
I read somewhere that you have said you could have seen yourself as a performer in another life.
Totally.
And you love theater.
Love theater, love performing. I mean, I think fashion is performance too. It's like, I think entertainment has a lot of facets. It could be writing, it could be music, it could be fashion. I mean, when we put together a show and we have this runway show, to me, it's a 7-minute piece of live theater. Like it has all the emotion, it has all the costuming, it has the hair, the makeup, the casting. Mm-hmm. So what makes it different than a show? It's a show.
Which I think now in this day and age has actually given you a really specific, because the kind of business side of fashion shows is faded, right? With the rise of the internet, with Instagram, you don't need to have it. The necessity of it from a business perspective is different. So it is really about leaning into the performance, which you've done so well.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have a CEO at our company now who is incredible. And I adore him. His name is Eric. And, he speaks, he understands the importance of the runway and what we do. It's not a business in terms of dollar and cents or dollars and cents. What he expects from us is a story every 6 months or 4 months or 5 months, whatever it is. He expects a story, and one that inspires people within the company who do make the products that are commercial. So there's still just as much pressure to perform on a creative level, but we don't have the pressure to perform on a sales level.
Right.
And I think, honestly, my feeling about high-end fashion, it should be scarce. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be, hugely available. And there should be no wastage. Like when you're making expensive clothes, you don't want to see like these dresses hanging on wire hangers on a markdown rack, or overproduced or whatever. Like, so I feel that what we're doing really makes sense with the like kind of high-end fashion statement kind of idea.
Totally. I'm thinking about just the evolution of magazines and how, now you're talking about making images for the internet and for Instagram. And it's like this beautiful book that, used to come out every month. It just doesn't have the same value. But what is happening now is that there really are beautiful books being created. And then there's sort of the other side of it, which is just a bunch of images for the internet, for Instagram, for TikTok, whatever. And I feel like you have kind of started this new model that really makes sense, that allows, the preservation of this traditional type of fashion show and creative process that, other brands are sort of struggling to find that balance.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we're lucky or they're lucky, but I mean, there's huge brands that, or I hate to call them brands when they make a luxury product, but I hate to say product when it's luxury, like all those things sound very cheap. But I guess when I think about my experience, like say at Louis Vuitton, you're talking about like this storied house that has always made luxury products. And then if you look at Dior, or you look at Givenchy, or you look at Prada, or you look at Bottega, or those brands have like such a deep history of making luxury things. And I think they've all been very wise in getting younger, more interesting designers, more creative designers to do what they need them to do. But I think it's very different when you're not one of those like houses in Europe, so like it's very atypical. Like America or the US doesn't really have like luxury brands, And I think other than like Ralph Lauren or Michael Kors, we just don't have there's a lot of young designers who are super creative and talented, but you don't have like old historic houses like you do in Europe?
Well, I mean, I think this really brings me I wanted to talk to you about your beginning days into fashion, also just growing up in New York City and sort of performance and how that played into what you ended up doing. But, you know, Marc Jacobs has become sort of a Central American designer in a lot of ways.
I guess it's relative. I mean, you know, when I was in school at Parsons, or even before, when I was in the High School of Art and Design, what American fashion looked like was Halston, Calvin Klein, Perry Ellis. Donna Karan wasn't yet on her own, but Anne Klein, Halston, Calvin, Ralph, and they were the big American designers, and they all had licensees and like huge, like they were huge. Now, I don't know if they were huge in Europe,
right?
But as a kid in high school, these were like the equivalent of famous European designers, only they were American. And I think at a certain point, you know, that just changed. Like Calvin was no longer at his, you know, company. He sold his company, or I think he sold his company, or he left his company. And Donna Karan no longer was at her company. Like, so all of a sudden, so there was just Ralph, you know,
right.
or Michael. Michael Kors kind of took over.
But you said at some point, I think, like, I wasn't an American designer. I wasn't a French designer. I was just
a designer.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting. What was it like? Give a little bit of a picture, because Louis Vuitton obviously has become something that I think was very different from when you started. What was that moment like, coming off of, you know, having this collection at Perry Ellis, being this young designer, and then taking this role on at this very, you know, huge European house?
Yeah. Well, we can talk about this on lots of different levels.
Yeah.
So I was a nervous wreck because it was very daunting. Like, what do you know, like, how do I do this? And again, looking at the time when this all happened, you know, I think I have a very good, you know, sort of take on it. I forget a lot of things, but this in particular I remember. You know, Tom Ford was at Gucci, and he was doing this incredible job at remaking Gucci from an old, you know, loafer with a snaffle bit to this hot brand that like Madonna was wearing and everybody wanted. And, you know, so I know that Mr. Arnault, the head of LVMH, was looking at what happened with Gucci and saying, well, if Gucci can do that, Louis Vuitton could do it. Now, Louis Vuitton they didn't have a classic loafer. They had bags with a classic monogram. You know, that was what made it identifiable. So Vuitton had become this huge luxury house, but it wasn't appealing to a young customer.
It wasn't cool.
It wasn't cool.
Yeah.
It had no like cred. It had no clout. It had no nothing. What it had was this historic sort of monogram. But I remember even, and you know, I won't even repeat it. It's just not a very good thing to say. But so Mr. Arnault had this idea that he wanted someone to come in and shake it up and design and do. And
at that point, were you sort of like a bad boy? Like what?
Well, I wasn't really a bad boy. I was really a good boy. Yeah. I mean, well, again, this could different. It depends what you're talking about.
Personal, fashion-wise.
Right. I mean, I was very naughty in terms of like my craziness and my partying and all of that.
Yeah, you were at like Studio 54 at 15 or something, right?
Yes. But
that was a
16. But that was I was less naughty then.
Okay.
So I might have been in clubs for, you know, a lot of my youth, but it sort of accelerated my drinking, my drugging, et cetera. But when I went to Vuitton, I was very excited about it. And the first presentation I made to them, I was like, well, I believe that Vuitton could be menswear, women's wear, accessories, jewelry. And I kind of drew it all out and gave them examples of what like a Louis Vuitton watch would look like and what a Louis Vuitton raincoat would look like. And Mr. Arnault loved the presentation, and he thought I was the right person for the job. I'm sure it didn't hurt that Anna Wintour was like totally on my side. And he, I think, you know, really respected her opinion. So I got the job. And then that was like crazy beginning because they had no idea like that we needed sewers and we needed.
How old were you? I just want to get a
Oh God, how old was I? I don't remember. So do you know what year I went there? Because I was born in 63. So,
I mean,
well, 92 is grunge, right? So I had to have been
90. I want to say it was 90.
It's 90 something.
97. Yeah. January 97.
There you go.
Yeah.
We figured it out.
There you go.
So I went there and, there was my partner and I went there, Robert, who is, partner.
Duffy.
And yes, Duffy, who, started the whole business for us and
for Marc Jacobs.
And also was responsible for hiring me way before there was a Marc Jacobs brand, when I was much younger, right out of school, Parsons. Anyway, so Louis Vuitton, I'm there, we're sitting there, we're like in this building way out of Paris. And we're like La Défense, it's called. And we're like, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah.
And like, how do we make this work? Like, we have to find people to work with us. We have to build a team. We have to get a studio. We have to find people to sew, make patterns, etc. So we did. And then we kind of had a date for
So they didn't even have that infrastructure?
No.
Why not?
Because each of the LVMH brands operates separately. So
Okay.
Dior, remember again, Dior was a couture house. So they had an atelier
Wow.
that was started in 1948 or 50, whatever. I don't know what year it was. But like all of their other brands were used to making couture and ready to wear. But Vuitton never had it. So
Wow.
we had to go in and start it and mold it and make it. And then we had
From
our
the bottom
first
up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it was crazy. But, I ran into Peter Copping, who was there from the beginning. And he was at Steve's funeral. And Kemi Michelli, who was part of my original team. And now she does Pucci. Peter's at Balenciaga. But we were all kind of, not all of us, but a few of us were there. And they were, our original team that were sitting in the Rue du Bac in an apartment, which we made into a studio. Like, it was so crazy to think that it was that disorganized and like that, like.
Well, and that this kid came from America and had to like whip it into shape.
It was so naive.
Yeah.
We were so naive. And then it grew, and then they owned a shoe factory, and they built a shoe factory. And, it sort of evolved over 16 years.
Right.
Into this fully, then we had a little atelier for, made to measure. And then so it all kind of evolved. But it wasn't like that in the beginning.
Do you think that's a central part of your creative process, is sort of having that freedom and that ability to kind of like have a blank space and start from nothing? Like, I've been to some of your fittings before show, like 4 days before shows, and the clothes are still coming together, vision's still coming together, and it's this really intuitive, instinctual process.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, I speak to my shrink about this all the time, is that I believe that somebody else does it better. Somebody else is more organized. Somebody else has a vision that's so clear that they just they spend months executing that vision that they know has to happen. And it's not my process. It's like, as much as I wish it were, it just isn't. Like, my and our process is one that's like, it evolves, and I'm open to it changing up until the last minute. Like, yeah. I'm up for a long dress becoming a mini dress, like, it's, if that's the way you feel it at the end, like, I know that it causes me a lot of stress, not having the clarity that I wish I had, but it also allows for a lot of like really wonderful last minute things.
Well, you can be nimble, right? And you can be inspired, and you're not, sticking to a book.
Yeah, but everything comes with a price, like.
Totally. It's just so funny, sitting here and you have these decades of incredible successes, and you're still questioning your creative process and thinking that somebody's probably doing it better. I'm sure I understand from your internal life how like much you suffer probably.
Well, it's part imposter syndrome, which
right.
I hate saying, because everyone in the world goes around now saying that
yes, I
they're
just
suffering
did an
from
episode
imposter
about
syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. And,
well, it's like narrative, and I don't know. There's just so many words. It's so funny. They really have a short lifespan, which I guess is like everything now. Whereas like you hear it so much that people are like, oh, on to the next. It's like the current emoji that's popular, or
totally.
Everything has this sort of this huge impact, and then it's sort of this short lifespan.
But do you feel like to use the term, but imposter syndrome sort of motivates you?
So that's that double-edged sword part of it, is that like I think fear and insecurity and self-doubt and like all that stuff is kind of it is like it motivates me in a way. It's like fear is a huge motivator.
It almost feels like it makes you more courageous though, because one of the things that I was reading about your childhood and your adolescence in New York, like you were always Mark. You were always yourself. You were always this person who had a very specific vision for yourself. And I know that you were the you were the oldest sibling, right?
Yeah.
So you were kind of in charge. You ended up being in charge, right?
Yeah.
A bit.
Much to my dismay.
Situation with your mother. Yeah. And your grandmother really like encouraged this person to connect to fashion and become.
Yeah.
So has it just been something that was sort of always inside of you? This like, not just the idea of expressing yourself and being an artist, obviously, I think that's true, but kind of the ability to be like, this is who I am and I'm going to play with this thing and I'm going to put myself out in the world. Kind of, I mean, I loved what you said about never coming out or never being in. You were just like, this is who I am.
Yeah, I mean, there were moments. It's complicated because now it's like, of course, I have a certain strength in saying things that I think I had to temper in different situations, and I'm very aware of like the arc of my, of who I am and what I was and who I'll always be. Yeah, so I think.
What do you mean? What do you think the arc is?
Well, I think I went through like. I was bullied as a kid. And so I kind of hid who I was, sort of like I was never very good at hiding who I was, because I also had that feeling of, fuck you. I'm not changing for you. So I hated being bullied for who I was, but I wasn't willing to change who I was. That said, I was in situations where I would like lower my voice or talk less or sit on my hands. Because the fear, I don't know, there's a movie, Zelig, and I felt like I was that chameleon that would change like out of self-preservation. I don't know how successful it was, but like, and why I found myself in a sports bar, I don't know the first thing about baseball or football or anything, but I knew that I had to change my behavior and the way I spoke because I was sitting in between two heterosexual men in a sports bar. But I didn't really have to because those two people brought me to it and they knew full well that anyway, it was just the stories I would tell myself is like, you're not safe here. You need to do something to protect yourself. But
which
then on
probably
the other,
was true.
Which was probably
a lot
true.
of the time as well.
But I was still in New York City, which is a bubble. And it was the things, I didn't have a lot of people, like a lot of sounding boards maybe during parts of my youth. So the stories I told myself were like, you can do this, you can change a little bit and you'll be fine.
Right.
And maybe that's true, maybe that wasn't true. Maybe I needed to do it, maybe I didn't. But like I said, no matter what kind of bullying, no matter what kind of insecurities I had, like I wasn't really going to change, who I was for anybody. And I think with years of experience, like I felt more fuck you than ever and more like, I don't really give a shit what you think of me, and it almost became like a challenge. Like I would go further. Like, you thought I was like this before. Wait till you see me in, this getup or whatever. But it's just a game.
And would you say you've applied that to designing? I mean, I'm thinking obviously of the grunge collection and this sort of reaction, right? Everyone was like, holy shit, this is genius. But then the world basically wasn't ready for it. It was like this,
I think a lot of times with Katie, we would get to this place, I'd be insecure. I'd call her up or text her and say like, I don't know. I think, and like you'd be very hesitant and insecure, which I still am and always probably will be. But like when we worked together and she knew my arc and how it would go. And there would come a point where there was just like something clicked. And I'd say like, you know what? I really don't know whether people will like this, love this, or hate this. but we have to, like, this is what we have to do. We're just going to do it and fuck it. And, there would come that moment. And then it would be once the fuck it moment came, then we had to make it all happen through the casting and the hair and the makeup. But like the designing part was really like, I don't really care what anybody thinks. This is what we're doing,
I mean, and it's worked incredibly well.
I think people leave, I think people I care about, not that I care about, people whose opinion I respect leave the show feeling moved. Sometimes they feel really blown away by what they see in terms of clothes. Other times they're just moved, or,
the experience of the show is something.
But I think they leave with something. And I think it's never indifferent. That's what we want to avoid at all costs. So,
I read something about how you had this like craze around you of this young designer at one point in your life. And then I think it was in this New York Times profile I was telling you I read. And then you're like, oh, now I'm not that, but I'm something else. And I have the privilege of still doing this, which I thought was a very humble and nice thing to say, because in my mind, I told you I wanted to talk about heaven, and really why I'm interested in that is on both the artistic and the business side, the way you have been able to connect to the zeitgeist kind of throughout your career. It wasn't that like you had a moment. It's like you've continued to kind of evolve and reinvent yourself on both sides, right? Creatively and also, just as a brand.
Yeah.
What do you attribute to that to? Like, how does that happen? Because that's what everybody wants, and not everyone can do it.
I'm not convinced that on the collection, like the high end, that we really connect to the zeitgeist or even to fashion. I think we tell a story, and I think that what we present is creative, et cetera. I wish it was more, that there was perhaps more relevance in terms of the appeal of the collection. And what I'm really grateful for is that, a couple of years ago, I'll tell the story.
Yeah.
A few years ago, actually now, I forget, with COVID, it's more than a few, but it's more than that. There was a sweatshirt that had my name misspelled in like kind of handwriting. And it was like a counterfeit Marc Jacobs sweatshirt. And it was done by this girl, Ava. And we met with Ava, and I just thought like it was so cool. And she had done another one too. There was two sweatshirts that were kind of counterfeity. And that was her thing. And I don't know, we talked about doing something. And, I asked her if she would be interested in doing something with us. And it was really undefined. We didn't really know what it would be, but she expressed interest. And I think at that time she was still working in some capacity at Helmut Lang. And she came to Marc Jacobs, the company, which is also weird for me to say, my own name.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
It's weird. She kind of defined this thing that what she wanted to do. And then we talked about a name, and then it became Heaven. And it's funny. I think that she was comfortable that I've myself and some of my friends always say heaven to describe something that we love, and she was good with it. And I think, and then she said about like bringing together a community of creatives that were friends of hers or people whose work she was interested in. And she looked at my past and my friends from the past and their creative output, and she was inspired by that. And just like she kind of built this heaven thing into, with Harley doing pictures and people that we were all interested in from back then, from currently, and it's been great. And I think how we connected with this zeitgeist, is that the word you used?
It was.
Is that what we did was we allowed and encouraged Ava to do what she thought was right. And I can't say that I'm creatively involved in those decisions. I'm not. What I did was allow her and encourage her to do what she felt would make heaven this great thing. And that's what she's done.
That's so interesting. I think that, you are somebody who has such a specific vision and you've been this creative director. Marc Jacobs, as you said, I mean, it's a name that's been knocked off a million times. Like people, Marc Jacobs. It's really one of the first brands you built. Everybody now knows that, a name is a brand, a person is a brand, but you really kind of did that before people understood it that way. But you also have this incredible inclination towards collaboration, which I've watched with Katie Graham, the stylist that you've mentioned a few times. And just in general, really, being a curious person who I know like very much is interested in art and theater and culture in general and is paying attention. And then, yes, it is you, but you also are really great at collaborating.
I think everything's a collaboration. I mean, when I look at what it takes for us to make the clothes, there's a collaboration with the pattern makers. We give them a sketch, they interpret it, they come back with their interpretation. We go back to them with what we want to correct. It's a collaboration. The pattern makers with the women who sew, that whether men or women who sew or tailor, that's a collaboration. It's like the whole equals the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you reach out and bring all these creatives into this cake, or these parts. And I think, I don't know why I just got this flash of you against a red background in a skunk coat, like that David Sims shot. And I thought the photographer, this creative genius of a photographer, David Sims, you, who was modeling and acting, came into like my little world. And, there's that picture, it's like everything is a collaboration. Yeah. And yes, I really, really value people in other creative fields because I think it makes what I do in fashion so much more rich and so much more exciting. So I love people who are, making music, today, pop culture or then, artists, contemporary artists, and then of course models, actors and photographers and filmmakers, like, it just makes all of our jobs so much richer to have more facets, I think. And I think that, when you make those choices, like you make them instinctively for a reason. And then that person who you've reached out to for this collaboration, what they bring to it. Like, again, I remember the day we did that picture and what you brought to the set was incredible.
No, thank you.
But it was. What you brought to that show at the Ziegfeld was incredible. But that's that energy, that special thing that you feel from people. And sometimes it's the work that I see. And like, you can see work from an artist and then be disappointed in the artist, thinking like, oh, wow, I really love that, but I wasn't turned on by the person. It rarely happens. I mean, typically if I love work, there's a really brilliant person behind it.
Right. I mean, it's just interesting, that kind of instinct and then the insecurity that comes with the second guessing, which I also think is important because then that, if you were only trusting your instinct and kind of thinking like, I know exactly whatever, then you don't rework, you don't edit, and it doesn't get better. There's no kind of way to evolve and push yourself. And it's a tough thing for anybody in any artist in any space, right? To kind of find the balance of holding your ground and understanding your own vision while also allowing the right amount of input in, which is why I'm so interested in your process.
Well, a collaboration, I mean, again, sometimes I think there's a real exchange of ideas and both sides are very interested in working together. And that to me is a true collaboration. And again, it could be an artist, it could be a model, it could be a photographer. When two creatives really want to work together and it isn't like a battle of egos or something, I think something really great can come of it,
You've had so many amazing collaborations.
But I'm really interested in collaboration. I'm not interested in somebody like sending me a drawing and then I slap it on a handbag. Like, it's just like, that's not to me a collaboration.
Right. You want to work together. You want to have the conversations. You want to,
Yeah, sure.
So from a non-creative side of collaboration, you mentioned your business partner, Duffy, that you worked with. Robert. And he was the first one who sort of said, like, let's make Marc Jacobs, or I don't know. Tell me about that kind of moment.
I was in college, Parsons School of Design. In the senior class, like your senior project was to put on this fashion show of a spring look and a fall look. And so I was part of that show. I won these awards. I won the Perry Ellis Gold Thimble Award. I won the Chester Weinberg Gold Thimble Award. I won the J.C. Penney Student of the Year Award. So I was like loaded up with awards and I was definitely like the star student, So, and I didn't decide that, they did, although I would agree. And Robert
is what it is.
Right. Yeah, there you go. And they have this gala dinner, like a black tie dinner, where they have this fashion show is held. And Robert Duffy, who was working for a 7th Avenue house, a dress house making very 80s kind of dynasty dresses, he saw my work, and knowing that the people who owned the company he worked for wanted to start a kind of contemporary line. That was a word that's sort of gone.
Yeah.
There was this weird sort of department store like setup where you had junior, which was very young and juniory, and then you had bridge, which was about cheaper clothes or mid-price clothes, but they were for work, and then contemporary, which was like adult clothes but with a young attitude. And so it was a fun time.
So interesting. Yeah.
Right. So they were starting this line that was going to be contemporary. And Robert convinced them to hire me. I had no experience other than being a stock boy and a salesperson at Charvari. I had which was a store. Mm-hmm. And he convinced them to hire me. And again, way before Vuitton happened, I ended up like in 37th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue in a studio probably the size of this room with no one. I was alone. I didn't know how to buy fabric. I didn't know how to find a sewer. I didn't know how to find a... So I was like, oh my God. But I asked people, sometimes when I'm in a situation where students ask questions, I said, well, the way I did it was I asked people, and I wasn't ashamed to not know. I was like, how do you do this? How do you make an appointment with a fabric house? How do you find seamstresses? How do you look for, how do you interview people? I just asked people. I really was shameless. I was like, I don't know how to do this. Tell me how to do it.
I mean, it's so important. It's, I think a lot of the time we posture and then we end up hurting ourselves, right? Especially in those early days.
Yeah.
So then what happened, Mark? Was it an instant success? Was Marc Jacobs
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, I got a lot of attention, which for me is bliss. I mean, that's what I want more than anything in life is attention.
Performance.
I want validation and I want to perform. I want people to clap for me. I just, in some way or another, like, again, I don't know if this is exactly psych talk, but, that idea of like being loved is not the same thing as getting attention. But for me, somehow it is. So
it's been braided together, and it's impossible to discern which is love and which is actual.
Right. Like after some dinner when you're a kid and you kind of do a magic trick or you sing or you play the piano and like all your family's like clapping for you, you think like, oh, wow.
I'm special.
I'm
loved.
Yeah. So anyway.
So you had that with Marc Jacobs. So you were like,
so we had a lot of attention. We got a lot of praise. We got a lot of attention. And we sold some clothes, but it wasn't enough. After a year and a half, it just wasn't enough. And they decided not to continue doing it. So then I went to another situation. So we went from one situation to another, which lasted a minute, and then another situation, which lasted 10 minutes, and until the Perry Ellis gig came.
Right. It's really nice to know that it just, doesn't happen like that, which of course is always the story. But I think sometimes people forget that. Even somebody who, has been through that, it's hard to, to see that in other people and realize, oh, there's so many misses and, trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What movie was Jamie Lee Curtis in, the horror movie that she was in? Was it Friday the 13th? Let's say it was Friday the 13th. So there was this writer for the New York Times, and they had reviewed one of my, she's no, Amy Spindler, I think it was, maybe it was Amy Spindler, who's no longer around. But so they wrote this review of his show, and they said, Marc Jacobs has had more comebacks than Jamie Lee Curtis in a Friday the 13th
Oh
movie.
my God.
So which I thought was brilliant, because apparently, she had near deaths or whatever. I don't know.
9 lives, whatever.
Yeah. But I just love that. I was like, yeah, I have.
So we've just found out that actually the Jamie Lee Curtis movie was Halloween, but the story is still many comebacks is the point.
Yeah, I knew it was scary.
So, I mean,
very true.
Are you going to continue to sort of live that life of?
It's the way it happens. It's like I kind of like rise to the occasion again, like what,
I mean, that's what comes with longevity, right? It's never just one constant.
Maybe it is for someone. It's just not my story.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it is. I think it's easy to see that from the outside if you're not paying attention and whatever. That could be your perspective.
I think you're right. I mean, from the outside, it looks very, very different than it does from the inside. But as you're talking to me, the person, I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It does seem like somewhere else it's got to be smoother, you know?
I understand that.
It's our story. This is what my story is what our story is, right?
It's beautiful. Okay, so a new thing I've been doing on the podcast, it's called High Low.
Okay.
I really am curious for your answers for this. I like high picks and low picks.
High picks.
So whatever you consider lowbrow, highbrow, you get to choose what categories are which. You could start with either what have you been into in a highbrow capacity or lowbrow capacity, shitty TV you've been watching, snacks, or art you've been enjoying, whatever.
Oof. So highbrow, clothes shopping at Saint Laurent, clothes shopping at Balenciaga. Is that highbrow?
Yeah.
That's good, highbrow. Mm-hmm. Lowbrow, watching 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days.
I haven't seen it yet.
So bad, it's so good.
People love it.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I mean, lowbrow for me, but it's so good, is Burger King, or Popeye's chicken, but I haven't had it in so long. I
was going to say, how often do you eat?
Well, lately I've been on a diet, so I really haven't had it in a long time. And when I've been cheating, I've been still cheating with like good quality food.
Okay, but if you could, Burger King.
Yeah. Oh God, would I love a Burger King Whopper.
No, I'm now you're going to be craving one for the next couple
of days.
I've
been craving one for weeks.
And God. Can this be like a birthday present, a Burger King?
Well, I thought
burger?
about it. I thought about it, but then I talked myself out of it thinking like, do things like, even if I was going to cheat, I thought I should cheat with good food. I think last week I had like some chocolate covered matzah and I had chocolate covered strawberries for our wedding anniversary.
If those are the things that are your guilty pleasures, then like get out of here. That's not even bad.
But it's not so bad. I'm trying to think of other lowbrow things.
I feel like Charlie and you have a great balance of that. Like he'll like put on like
Chipotle. So he insists on going to Chipotle for his birthday. So I have tried for years to do something nice and go somewhere nice and take him somewhere special. Nope. He just wants to go to Chipotle. And that's where I proposed to him because...
That's so sweet.
Well, because I knew that's where he wanted to be on his birthday. So I had to organize that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been together?
4 years. We just celebrated our 4th year with fruit and flowers, our 4th year.
It's really lovely.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be at the wedding and I just adore Charlie. And yeah.
He's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you about a million other things that we didn't even get to. But I'm just, so excited to see what you do next in personal and professional.
Thank you.
Yeah.